Welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast, presented by Orion Advisor Solutions and hosted by Dr. Daniel Crosby, Orion's Chief Behavioral Officer and New York Times best-selling author. Each week, Dr. Crosby interviews a fascinating new guest on a range of compelling topics, from literature to psychology to financial wellness. To learn more about Dr. Crosby's behavioral finance work at Orion, visit www.orion.com.
Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and today I am joined by my friend, Lindsey Lewis. Lindsey has built a career around women and money. She not only helps women take charge of their finances as a chartered financial consultant and CFP professional, but she also stands as a champion for diverse women in the financial services industry in her role as Senior Director and Chair of the American College Center for Women in Financial Services. Lindsey spearheads the Women Working in Wealth social media channels, podcasts, and exclusive events. And because of her efforts, she has been honored with the Investment News Hot List, 2021's Investment News 40 Under 40, and a recipient of the Excel Represents Rising Star Women in Wealth Management. She has 2 degrees from Utah Valley University, personal financial planning, and an MBA. Welcome to the show.
Thrilled to be here and so excited to dive into our content today.
We're going to have a great conversation. We first met just last year.
In real life. We've met virtually before.
But in real life, we first met last year at XYPN.
Correct.
Thank you to Michael Kitsis for bringing the people together, right? Thank you. Thank you to Michael. We've been meaning to do this ever since. So we're going to have a great conversation about the rising generation of advisors, about women and wealth. And I want to start at the very beginning and say out loud, women are the ultimate behavioral investors, okay? Women outperform men in both retail and professional settings. A recent study by OpenFolio found that they outperform men by 1.3% during down markets. And a Wells Fargo study from a few years back revealed that women have higher degrees of discipline, greater willingness to learn, and careful, well-thought-out risk-taking behaviors that all contribute to this outperformance. What makes women so uniquely good at this world of investing that we work in?
Yeah, it's multifaceted, but I'll cover 3 major topics. So one is that women trade less frequently than men. So they aren't day trading, they're not churning their accounts, so they're staying the course. The second reason is that women are more patient with their investments. So they're not quickly making decisions, and they also are looking at a macro level lens and making sure that their goals and their investments are tied together. And a third reason is that women are more likely to hire financial advisors than men are and take the advice. So it's twofold there. You can hire a great fitness coach or a great coach across the board, but implementing and taking that advice. So you see women trading less, being more patient, hiring advisors. And as, a person I look up to a lot, Sally Krawcheck says, is that women are more risk aware. There's a lot of talk out there that women are risk adverse, which is not necessarily true if you look at the data long term, especially with the newer generation, but they are risk aware. So they're understanding the dynamics of timeline with investment strategies and making sure that they're aligned. And women look at finances more holistically. So they might be in charge of budgets as well as investments. And so they're thinking, oh, if I'm too aggressive here, I need to make sure I'm covering the grocery budget. And so they're just looking at the holistic picture. So women are awesome, and they definitely are looking at finance through a unique and a very educated lens.
Women are awesome. That's what we're here to discuss today. I want to touch on a couple of those points. I think it's important to kind of circle back and re-emphasize the point about women in aggregate not being less risk averse than men. I think that is a widespread myth. And what we see is that whatever vestige of that was once there, it's disappearing as the confidence gap narrows, right? We see a tremendous confidence gap among older women, but in newer generations and younger generations, that is shrinking precipitously to the point where it's negligible, if it exists at all, among the youngest investors. And yet I still think a lot of people and a lot of advisors are hanging on to this idea that women are less willing to take risk. And it's especially damaging because women live longer and have sort of unique considerations that may need them to take more risk later into their lives.
Yeah, there's definitely that longevity factor where, if you and your spouse are both alive at age 65 in a hetero couple, there's a 50% chance that one of you will live to age 90. And statistically speaking, it's more likely to be a woman. And as they're getting more educated, right, you mentioned that risk awareness is that they need their portfolio to last longer. And through varying different life events and the increased cost of healthcare. And so making sure that they have the proper exposure in their portfolio early on definitely will pay dividends down the road. But you can't just say, it's the narrative and cultural things to blame. If you go back, there's this great book called Ladies of the Ticker. It goes through the history of Wall Street through the eyes of women. And if you look at the history of Wall Street, and women weren't even allowed on the trading floor until 1940s, what they were sold at the same time as a male counterpart was, their inception into the stock market, someone is putting them into a bond strategy back in the day versus a male in an equity strategy, just because of that's how they treated different, classes of people or different types of people. So their projection moving forward just from those inception of the stock market totally changed it. And so you see, some of these cultural things where women are like, well, my grandma and my mom, they were in bonds, and so I should probably have bonds, where it was a product of the system at place, versus now, as we have, better access to quality information and education, you see women changing that and advisors, incorporating that. But that's really important for financial professionals. And as women and folks seek financial professionals, is that they're not just copying and pasting portfolios that were in existence just because that worked a decade, 2 decades, 4 decades ago, but really tailoring to the client and the person's current life circumstances.
So this is normally a question I'd end with, but I don't want to miss it because you mentioned a book that I had not heard of, right? I have a couple of go-to books on this subject. Are there books that you recommend that people read if they want to understand women as sort of the ultimate behavioral investors?
Yeah, so Ladies of the Ticker is the one that I brought up. So that's the history of Wall Street. It will definitely enrage you and you will learn a lot. Another one that is written recently is called Undiversified, the Big Gender Short in Investment Management. 2 investment manager women wrote that book, and that one is very data intensive. So definitely one of those reads that you want to digest gradually over time. But looking at, when we look at great diversified portfolios, you have investments in all different asset classes and you're balanced across the board. But when you look at investment management at a large, very few women are female investment managers. And when you look at where dollars are going, fewer than 2% of VC dollars are going to women-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. So as we look to change and evolve the investment landscape at large, incorporating more women into that equation is integral into making a difference in the future. But there's so many cultural things that go in front of that where, girls' confidence in math peaks at age 9, and then they're being told different money narratives versus men. So 70% of articles that are written towards men are about grow, build, save, invest, versus 2/3 of articles that are written to women are spend less, save more, coupon clip, budget. So you even go into pop cultural narratives as well as what's being written and talked about. And that's where you're seeing this big divide of women interested in STEM-related fields, specifically in finance. So there's definitely all these different books. So those are two that I really appreciate. But coming full circle, it's just really about how to build awareness around this industry and the unique investment perspectives for women.
This is going to be one of those good podcasts where there's so much good stuff. I have to choose what to grab onto because those stats are so shocking. Like it gets sort of ingrained in the culture and then it's just insidious and almost imperceptible that the way that even articles are written and what gets emphasized and what gets de-emphasized, it's so subtle, but it's so powerful. My contributions to the what book to read, Warren Buffett Invests Like a Girl by Lou Ann Lopton is very good. Women of the Street by Meredith Jones is a sort of market wizards of women market wizards, like hedge fund managers and private equity folks who are women. And then The Hour Between Dog and Wolf is not explicitly about gender issues, but it talks about sort of the nature versus nurture thing in investing and trading and even how something like testosterone levels would drive men to be worse investors than women. So all interesting reads. Listeners have a lot to work on. Okay, you've thrown out some incredible stats. I'm going to throw out what to me is the most shocking of all the research I prepared today. This was a Fidelity study. Okay, so we've just talked about how women outperform men effectively in every context, including I found private investment groups like a group of senior retired ladies in an investment club beats the retired men's club, which is incredible. So despite evidence of outperformance at both the household and professional settings, along with better risk adjusted acumen, just 9% of people surveyed in a study by Fidelity that was half men and half women expected women to beat men in investment management. So they surveyed hundreds of men and women, equal parts men and women. And this mixed cohort, 9% of them expected women to beat men in investment management. Lindsey, where is the disconnect when it's so pronounced, it's so pervasive, and no one believes it, including the women themselves?
Yeah, you have to look at, like I mentioned, the cultural upbringing and definitely the inception of the stock market itself, where if you look at pop culture, there aren't very many or any movies or videos about women being successful in investing. So you have movies like The Big Short or The Wolf of Wall Street, which is illustrating finance in a very masculine, testosterone-based way, perhaps even exploiting women within those contexts. So you have kind of this pop culture belief. And then if you look at the ads and programming that have been over the last number of years, you've seen a shift recently where they're incorporating more women into those, is that when you think of a financial advisor, and I ask women, non-binary folks, men, next-gen people, like when you think of a financial advisor, like what comes to mind? And typically it's a seasoned man who's working in a, mahogany office, and that's just the pop culture. So you have that, but you also have the data behind it. So when you look at the CFP board, for instance, they have had 23% women CFP professionals for the last 2 decades, right? So we haven't seen as much of an uptick. And so then when you look at different exposures of spheres of influence, right, when you think of someone I know and their auntie or their uncle, like who's coming to mind when you think of a financial professional? So as you get more women integrated into finance, whether in a client-facing advice space or within a home office, then you're growing that network. So a lot of the work I do is very much so like boots on the ground of how to build community and also to build exposure to financial services at earlier ages. So like I mentioned, girls' confidence in math is peaking at age 9. And when you're looking at the career selection that they're taking, if they are in elementary school and they see their teacher struggling with math and they happen to be a woman, then they're like self-selecting out of that. And then you see them, less likely to raise their hand as they age and get older within the school systems. And there really isn't as much exposure of finance being a career opportunity. So I was fortunate that I went to school in a state where financial literacy was required to graduate high school. You would think that should be across all states, but it has not been adopted to be a requirement to graduate from high school. I believe it's still in like the mid-30s space. So not all 50 states have required financial literacy to graduate high school. And also the magnitude. So some of them, it could just be like one day of a one course, right? Versus a semester long for me. And that's what really helped shape my narrative moving forward, is that I grew up in a household where I had two college graduate parents that, are well educated but made dumb money decisions. And for me, that impacted me. But luckily, I had this financial literacy class that was the catalyst for having exposure to this career, which then ultimately pushed me into what is called a CFP registered undergrad program, which helps folks get exposure to this industry at a younger age. But at large, to answer your question, there's just not that much exposure. And you also go off of lived experience. And when I invite all of the listeners to think about their circle of influence. And when you think about the people in your community and in your friend groups, when you think, oh, this person's spouse is an accountant, are you thinking of a man or a woman? Are you thinking about, if they're a financial professional? It's interesting, even in my own household, like when we, went to apply for a loan for our house and they're like, who's the financial advisor? And I'm like, oh, it's actually me. So it's just thinking about that cultural aspect. And then also the data supports it as well.
It's interesting when you look at financial literacy programs from a strictly efficacy-based, does it work, right? Do people make better decisions in adulthood because they had a course in high school? It's a little bit of a mixed bag. And I think probably a lot of that rises and falls with the intensity of the curriculum, like you said. But that's sort of a use case for financial education and financial literacy among the youth that I never considered. It's just giving them an exposure to finance as a career path. Shout out to Ally Wealth. Ally Wealth a few years ago was an entirely woman-led organization, right? There was all women at the top senior leadership levels. I was going there to give a talk, and I wanted to take my daughter, who was 12 at the time. Her name is Charlotte. The event was in Charlotte. She had never been. I was like, hey, can I bring my daughter? And then, I'll take her out and run around the city after I give my speech. And they said, you can bring her if she will present to us on the spending, saving, and investing patterns of young people. And so my 12-year-old daughter, put on a suit and for 10 minutes, presented to a bunch of powerful women, and she walked away from that completely changed. Like, she walked away from that completely changed, and I felt so lucky that she was able to have that opportunity. And it goes back to, you have to see it to be it. So she saw powerful women making great money, making important decisions that impact the lives of thousands of people. And it became more than, a math class or whatever to her. And I wish every young woman and every young person had that opportunity, because I know it was so transformative for her.
Yeah, creating those transformative opportunities is really important to me. And that is part of the reason why I continue to give back to my alma mater. I've hosted an event for women and young women for the last 5 years who are interested in finance, entrepreneurship, and leadership, especially growing up in a very concentrated community south of Salt Lake City, Utah. There weren't a lot of income producing women outside of the home. And so just illustrating that you can have a career and, be a caretaker, have a family, travel, do whatever, has just been really important to me. And like you said, if you can see her, you can be her. And also creating those opportunities where you can find people who are just a step or two ahead of them so that they can have that exposure. But majority of, we just recently started a Gen Z pilot study around the perception of financial services and getting people into financial services. And frequently they just don't know that it's a career path. And then their perception of the career path is very stuffy and stodgy and rigid, even though there has been quite the expansion of what it looks like to be a financial advisor and, you know, what a day-to-day as a financial professional looks like. So I love that your daughter had that experience, and I hope that there are more young women. And we're currently working on a presentation that financial professionals could give at high schools and colleges, and they could go in. It's turnkey. You can customize it, but really just to provide that exposure at earlier ages.
Yeah, it's so important. So to recap, right? Women are better disciplined, better investors, higher returns, less overconfident. But like you said, typically not what people picture when they think of the typical advisor. And I mean, there's a reason for that. The numbers are not in their favor. Did you say it was 22% of CFPs?
23% for the last 2 decades. We're trying to do that. And then when you look at different designations across the board, they're typically in that range. There are a few that are actually the inverse, which is the CDFA, so the Chartered Divorce Financial Analyst, and then the AFC, which is the Accredited Financial Counselor, which both of those, the content resonates with women differently, but the rest of the designations fall into the majority male.
Yeah. I'm grateful for the CFP numbers, 23%. I had the CFA numbers, 18%, right? So 18 to 23% in arguably the two most respected designations in the industry. What can we do to get more women in the field when we know that they're so well suited for the field? What does that need to look like?
Yeah, there's multifaceted here, but a couple of things to think about is, one, women even having the goal or aspiration to a leadership or client-facing role. Also, when you look at the positions that women get into when they first get into the door. So when they take their first job right out of school, are they considered a client relationship manager, or are they considered a paraplanner or a junior analyst? So just the first initial title could change the trajectory of their career based on just the name and then the job path that follows that. So I typically am always advocating for the young women that I talk to, hey, if you want to be client facing, you can do client relationship management roles as a paraplanner or a junior analyst or something like that. So even if your day-to-day is still looking like paperwork, having the right title that puts you on a different career path. You also look at, when you're looking at women ascending to leadership within any organization, but specifically financial services, there is a key promotion that happens around it, usually between the age of 30 to 40. And if you look at, you know, let's say women at large, if they are in a hetero couple and they want to have children, that might also be the time that they are family planning. So then you add this additional complexity where they're not getting a key promotion, or they might not have the same intellectual capacity for a small period of time that they're having children or on maternity leave to follow that education aspect. Also, you find people who self-select out, like, not for me. I don't think I have the confidence to do this. But in our studies at the American College, what we find is that 60% of successful financial advisors get into this industry to help people. So they're in it for the right purposes. And you find that women, once they have more designations, their confidence in their ability increases. So taking that leap of faith and, you know, attempting to do one of these designation-based programs will actually help you, one, in your personal life, but two, your professional confidence as you go moving forward, and will help you get better positioned for leadership opportunities and the career growth that happens with it. But you have all of these things stacking up, right? You have cultural beliefs, not aware of the opportunities not necessarily exposed, perhaps having bad exposure. You find a lot of women who have been financially exploited by financial professionals, or they've seen their grandma or auntie get sold a product or a service that they don't need. And then you have, let's say they get into the industry, they enter in around the same rate, 50% male, 50% female, not including non-binary folks. And, the attrition rate for women of them falling out is much higher. So then when you look 7 years out, you have, only like 80% of people succeeding, but of that, majority of them are male. And then they're missing that key promotion, which then they're not. So it's just like this multifaceted thing. But a couple of things that you can do that are helpful. One is to create an exposure at earlier ages around the career field, which shout out to the CFP board. They went to the Girl Scouts of America National Conference last year just to illustrate, hey, this is a career path for women. And there's also investment Girl Scout badges now, things like that. You can create opportunities for access. If you are a firm listening to this, looking at the titles of your entry-level employees and making sure it puts them on a career path to be promoted, and looking at education as a key component. So finding a way to, you can start small, but there are different designations out there. But getting that designation as a woman within the industry increases confidence and also increases your ability and your professional capacity. So long-winded answer, but those are a couple of solutions to getting more women within the industry.
It's so fascinating. We know from the research that a woman won't apply for a job until she's approaching 100% of sort of every bullet point on the job application, but a man will let it rip with, a man will let it rip with 50% or less. So my wife is literally upstairs getting her third certification as a doula, right? And I just spoke with her when we had lunch together, and she said, I finally feel like I'm getting the knowledge base I need to help women. And I'm thinking, you were born to do this work. Like, you were competent before you took your first class. And she's 3 certifications deep, and she feels like she's starting to get there. Meanwhile, I'm watching a football game thinking I could be the head coach. So I think there's a lot of, that's an interesting angle that I hadn't considered, the power of a certification and getting women into certification programs to help overcome whatever lack of competence may exist. I like that. Let's talk about advisors working with women now, because we got a problem there as well. So just 47% of women say that they are confident talking about their money with a professional. And New York Life found that 40% of women felt advisors treated them differently, often ignoring what they have to say. What do you know from your work around how women get treated in the advisor's office, and what could we be doing better there?
Now, there are a number of studies out there, but one that's coming to mind is there's a study by Merrill that talks about the eye contact from a financial professional to a heterosexual couple. So regardless of the advisor's gender, they will spend 60% of their eye contact on the male in a heterosexual couple. And that is just an ingrained bias that's happening. So even eye contact alone, they're spending more time on the male partner. Then there are very educated women, but perhaps they aren't taking the lead role when it comes to their financial picture, which I always advocate for women to be educated and start getting educated as early as possible, because 90% of women will control their finances within their lifetime, whether it's death, disability, divorce, or underemployment. So it's definitely important to be well educated when it comes to your own financial picture. But also you see women abdicating responsibility to their male counterparts, and let's say in a heterosexual couple. At the college, we have a study on the retirement income literacy survey, and everybody's failing at their knowledge about retirement. In our study, women fail slightly more than men, but it's not like substantially greater, right? And those women are still abdicating to their male counterparts, even though their male counterparts are still failing about it. So then you see these financial advisors where, historically, perhaps the men have taken a larger role in this process. They're creating more eye contact, and then they're not listening to their female clients. So we also have another research report that shows that 90% of women will fire their financial professional after their male spouse passes away because they don't feel like their needs are being heard or met or seen, etc. So how women relate to money is different, and how they relate to their financial professional is different. So as a financial professional out here, it's one, being cognizant of our own biases that are happening. We're making more eye contact here, even if we're not necessarily planning on it. Two, it's also providing an opportunity for her to articulate how she's feeling. Make sure you understand goals, values, etc. We know that women are less likely to trade. So perhaps they're not as concerned about swapping out mutual funds, right? They are more patient and they have a longer vision, right? So perhaps it's making sure you understand the holistic goals and picture there. And then they're likely going to live longer, right? So addressing the needs and concerns that she will have aging and living longer, right? There's aspects of long-term care that perhaps advisors aren't bringing up, right? A lot of times clients will say you know what, I'm good. My kids are just going to take care of me. And then you're like, okay, when we talk about activities and daily uses, if you are unable to go to the bathroom by yourself, do you want your kids to help you with that? Right. And if the answer is no, then we have to think of a long-term care strategy that can be incorporated. But how comfortable are advisors asking that type of question? And that's where you get into, the behavioral side of this is what women want to talk about eventually, right? This is a concern that they have. They're thinking more holistically and making sure that their needs are addressed. And so just even spending time allowing the floor. I've worked in a lot of different investment meetings or quarterly meetings, and we're just the portfolio improved 3% over. And they're more concerned about, can I write a $10,000 check to my charity because they have a drive coming up and I've volunteered on the board for a decade. So just understanding the needs of your client, but also being aware of the cognitive biases that you can have as a financial professional.
Yeah, it's one of the big things that I'm taking away. I mean, you see that with girls and, that sort of the departure of young girls and their interest in math. The research shows that that's about the time when teachers start calling on them less and expecting less of them. And it's when we're swimming in this water, right? When we're all swimming in this cultural water that has specific ideas about men and women and their roles, oftentimes unspoken, something as subtle as that time of possession with eye contact, it feels like you're being ignored. You're being ignored, right? And that has a huge impact. I think that's a powerful thing to remember. And then it's that delicate dance of knowing things about women broadly, right? That women live longer and on average, and trying to address that, but not overgeneralizing too, because I think that's one of the things that the industry has done is try and paint women with too broad a brush sometimes. And there's always going to be more individual differences than there are group, sameness. And so balancing some basic ideas about women's needs with a willingness to listen and tune in and find out about that person's needs in particular.
Yeah, we have great content around the emerging women's needs and how the modern woman thinks about things differently, like family planning or, even deciding to be a childless couple or household and having financial professionals make assumptions about that. So it's crafting the language to be as inclusive as possible, but also, like you mentioned, not broad strokes where it's okay, when are you expecting to have your first child? And they're we don't want kids, so it is really getting that tailored content. And what's really important for clients is they want really two things out of an advisor. They want empathy and they want personalization. So they want to know that you care about how they feel and their needs, and they want it personalized. They want a little bit of tailored. It could be the same investment portfolio, but having the discussion of like, this is why it's important and this is why it will meet your needs and your philanthropic goals or your personal goals or your education goals, but having that personalization and empathy.
We're going to switch gears a little bit, but still very much in your wheelhouse and within your expertise. So over the decade that ended in 2022, total advisor headcount grew by a paltry 0.3%. Crazy, right? So that's like just over 2,000 new advisors. Yet the same study, this was done by Cerulli, so thank you, Cerulli. The same study found that 109,000 advisors plan to retire in the next decade. So we're adding, 2,700 advisors a decade and losing six figures, well into the six figures. My goodness, this is 41.5% of total industry assets that's going away. Where's the disconnect and how can we get young advisors interested in this work?
Yeah, so it goes back to a lot of the cultural things, but also exposure and getting them into the right types of organizations. So like I mentioned, I did a CFP registered undergrad program, and we took a course where we learned from people in all aspects of the business. And I was still kind of fuzzy around what's the difference between a fee-only advisor, an independent broker-dealer, a captive broker-dealer, a wirehouse, fintech, insurance agent, etc. So that's one thing that I'm working to break down is just transparency around the career at large. You have a lot of millennials or Gen Zs that have gone through really intense economic environments, right? So like witnessing or participating during, the financial crisis of 2008 or seeing the COVID impacts in their in their community and their societies, right? Like my younger brother's high school experience was totally changed and altered, and how they look at money and investments and global supply chain, and also how they want to have an impact within the organization, right? So it goes beyond, I just need a job. It's, hey, is my job impacting and improving society? Does my work change global climate change? Does my work impact, the carbon footprint of the U.S.? Does my work impact marginalized groups or different socioeconomic classes? And so as firms are building and creating their roles to attract this next generation of talent, I see these job descriptions, and we know that 60% of financial advisors are successful because they're in it to help people. And you look at these job descriptions and it doesn't talk about helping people once, right? It's like we build integrated big portfolios with holistic approaches. And it's like, okay, these folks want to make an impact. These folks want to get in here to help people. And this younger generation also wants something that's in it for them, right? What's an educational development that they could have? What's something that, an event or a conference or an activity that they could participate in? So you see all of that. And then you just have institutions that culturally don't align with these folks. And so you have these firms that are like, we've always done it this way. We're always going to do it this way. There's no way to be successful with a non-asset under management model, and we're not going to look at a retainer model or subscription model, and we're going to keep our active investment strategy. And so they're just not yielding on their processes. But where I find that it will be interesting is when they want to exit the business and there's not an advisor out there to acquire their firm, then do they just close the doors? As a financial professional, they help people financially plan, but what's their succession plan look like? And you see a lot of these organizations, including mine, who are spending more time, focusing on this next generation. But what are some different areas that we could focus on to come into financial services? So a couple of ideas that we've thrown around are looking at people who are exiting the healthcare industry. They've done some certifications, they've done licensure, they've done exams. That field is predominantly women. So what if we captured some of those folks coming over? When we look at the future of the real estate market, you have, majority of realtors are actually women who are over the age of, 40, who have a college degree. So what if we captured some of those folks? When you look at the education landscape, you have a number of educators who are wanting to leave education and go into a different field. So what if we could create paths and strategies for just those three areas to come into financial services? And really great creator, Hannah Moore, Amplified Planning. She's actually beta testing the first residency style program where career changers could have exposure at earlier ages or, while they're still working their other job. And, they could be career changers, they could be new entrants. So just thinking about ways and novel concepts or building off of a residency model or even a law model or an accountancy model or maybe something totally new. But if we stay on the path that we're on, we can do the math because we're financial professionals that we're going to have a shortage. And there's also this huge transition of wealth, like $70 trillion. So it's like you have tons of income, tons of potential, and just not enough people coming there. So having a tailored approach to get more folks is going to be paramount for the success.
I absolutely love what you said. It struck me so hard because you look at psychology, right? Psychology is the second most popular college degree program. And yet there's such a dearth of opportunity when you go up. I mean, I was in obviously in a PhD program in psychology. There's typically 4 people, right? I mean, if you can get in, it's paid for, it's wonderful. But big universities, tier 1 research universities, are letting in 3 to 6 people a year into PhD psychology programs. So you've got all these people who want to help, all these people who are fascinated by human behavior. And what is our field all about? Helping in human behavior. And yet, if you go on XYZ RIA's job board right now, it's going to be like Excel competency, balancing portfolios, it's going to look like an accounting job, and it's not. So we have to do more to align the reality of the work on the ground. There's so many people who would love to, A, help people, and B, get a fantastic check every month. I mean, this is a highly, highly compensated career that allows you to do good in the world. There's not a lot of jobs where you get to have a real impact on people's lives and make the kind of money an advisor can make. And I think if it's like the best kept secret in the world and we're doing a bad job of marketing.
Right. But if you look at consumers' confidence and trust in financial professionals, like they rank right above like used car salesmen. So I think there's also an industry rebrand of, like we're not selling you products that you don't need. We're actually helping people meet their goals and get their money in alignment. So yeah, it's that reframing. And yeah, I know a lot of people who have undergrads in psychology who are financial professionals, and they make excellent financial advisors.
Okay, last formal question, and then I have a very exciting Utah trivia portion that I'm thrilled about. Yeah. But I remember when I was new to this work, the thing that shocked me the most was that there just seems to be this industry-wide acceptance that the vast preponderance of rookie advisors are going to fail. And that's just kind of how we're going to do it. We're going to hire, every lacrosse athlete or whatever. We're going to throw a bunch of people with good, with good pedigrees into the pipeline. 72% of them, research that you sent me shows that 72% of them fail. And we're just cool with this at a time where we're bleeding advisors. So I'm going to, for one moment in time, we're going to make Lindsey Lewis the queen of the universe. You get to design a training program and a hiring program for new advisors. What changes do you make to improve this horrible attrition rate?
Yeah. So my first initial thoughts there are the people and firms. It's a less expensive client acquisition to hire new talent than to get new clients. So if I cast a broad net and I get a number of folks coming in and I know they're going to fail out and I'm going to receive their book of business when they leave, it is far less expensive to, one, either not pay this person or pay this person very minimal amount, and they reach out to their family and friends and I get another 50 million assets under management and that person leaves. So I think there's one that's like a cultural problem where there's values misalignment for firms and hiring talent. So there's not an incentive for retention, and there's just an incentive for them to grow their book of business or to, make more money. And so it's really, you have to think about the fundamentals of how people are compensated. So is assets under management the fee-based model that is going to be successful moving forward? Or is it incorporating a different model, which a lot of financial advisors or professionals in the space don't want to migrate from assets under management because they make a lot of money and sometimes they don't have to do a ton of work, right? So the amount of work I'm doing for a $10 million client versus a $1 million client might look very similar, even though I'm getting paid 10x for my $10 million client. So getting an alignment that way. The other thing that I look at is people are entering it not having understanding about the landscape of financial services or the spectrum of different offerings. So they get into a firm where they're just a bad cultural fit or they're a bad alignment to how they're being compensated. So I look at it in different buckets, but two that I really like is income risk capacity versus income risk tolerance. So my income risk tolerance, how comfortable am I if my paychecks vary from week to week? If I'm uncomfortable for that, then perhaps I need a more salary-based job. But if I come into this industry in a commission-based only role and I have a low income risk tolerance, I'm going to be completely unhappy and hop out. Then the other aspect I look at is income risk capacity. So how comfortable am I if I miss a paycheck? Can I meet the needs of what I need to do? So in my instance, I have 2 young kids. Healthcare is important to me. I want to make sure that childcare, healthcare, and all of their activities are taken care of. So my income risk capacity looks different than my younger brother who lives at home. So if I get put into a role that is, a lot of independence and autonomy, but it's commission only, and I miss a paycheck and I can't pay for childcare or something like that, that's going to negatively affect me and I'm going to hop out. So just being educated on the front end around, if I'm in this spectrum of the financial services industry and I'm going to, be commission-based and my paychecks could vary, even though I could have, the highest upside, I'm still going to be unhappy because I need consistency in income versus I get put into a very boiler template or conservative where I don't have to do a lot of business development, but I'm capped at growth. I can only make X amount of year and I'm going to hop out of there. So it's just having that education on the front end and getting that alignment, and then also putting yourself on a path to success. So, making sure that you have the appropriate job titles and that firms have career transparency. So the evolution of me coming in as an entry-level person to partnership, what's the plan to partnership? And frequently I come across folks where the guideposts are moving. So they're like, you got to hit this mark, you hit that mark. And they're like, actually, no, we met this mark. And then you're continually working, and then they're not necessarily getting to the path to partnership, which then they either go to entrepreneurship or they find something else, or they find a different aspect of the industry, or they totally opt out. So it's just making sure you have those alignments earlier on. And for firms, my big ask for you is just like from a cultural aspect, is just making sure that you can understand the importance to this next generation of folks, women, underrepresented groups, might be a different values alignment than some of the constituent partners who have been there for a while. And so it's how can you navigate and build a path and system that can help both people excel. And when you look at the diversity stats from like McKinsey across the board, right, the more diverse your team is, the greater margins of profitability that you'll have in the long run. So yeah, you're very frothy right now, but you could even have like 19% more growth if you had a more diverse team. So it's just thinking through those strategies. So this industry is amazing. We're going to, we have $70 trillion of wealth that's transitioning, 30 trillion of that going to the hands of women. We're shifting to a minority majority nation by 2050, and more than 10,000 advisors are retiring every year. So if you look at a job marketplace, I'm like, tick, tick, tick. Great place for this next generation, but it's just making sure that they have the awareness that they need for the firm and the compensation model that will align with their values.
The opportunity is huge. The work is meaningful, and I'm grateful to people like you who are telling the story. So hopefully we can get more great folks in the door. So, Lindsey, you've been incredible, but before you go, I gotta do some Utah trivia. And
Great!
Because I'm evil. So, you and I both, you live in Utah.
Not anymore. I'm in Charlotte now. So
you don't live anymore. We both attended school in Utah. How's that?
Yes, that's perfect.
We both attended school in Utah. We both have Utah ties. So we're going to see how much you know about the place you went to school and got your 2 degrees.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
True or false, Utah is the driest state in America?
I'm going to say false.
False. Very good. It's Nevada. It's second. Utah is the second driest state in America to Nevada.
You don't have Death Valley, so I think we're okay.
Okay. You're 1 for 1. Number 2, true or false, Utah has a city called Levan, which is naval spelled backwards because it's in the center of the state.
I'm going to say true.
True. I learned this today. It's a very weird fact. Backwards naval in the absolute middle of the state of Utah. Okay, number 3, true or false, Utah has the most national parks in the country.
Ooh, I know that there are 5, but I think California has more. So I'm going to say false.
Alaska and California have it beat. So number 3 behind Alaska and California, but there are 5 beautiful ones. You're doing great. True or false, Utah is the only state where every county contains part of a national forest.
I'm going to say false.
It's true.
Oh.
It's true. You're a disgrace to the Beehive State.
Oh, no.
I
no.
learned this myself. Okay. Number, whatever we are, 5. True or false, Salt Lake City is the nation's leading manufacturer of rubber chickens.
I actually think that's true.
That's true. That's true. There's apparently a company that makes
chickens
more than anywhere else in the world. Okay, 2 more. This one's super hard. I don't expect you to get this one. This state symbol is absolutely unique to Utah. Utah has one sort of state symbol that is in no other state has this type of symbol. Tricky, but
I don't know. The beehive.
Good guess. It's a cooking implement. Utah has a state cooking implement, and it's the Dutch oven.
Oh man, I've been to some great Dutch oven cook-offs though.
It's true. So now you know that the state symbol, one of the state symbols is the Dutch oven. Utah is the only one who has it. And then the last one, easy. What's the state insect?
The bee?
The bee.
The worker bee?
The bee. Yeah. State mottos, industry, the state insect is the bee. Okay, you're incredible. Oh, last one. Cafe Rio or Costa Vida?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to say Costa Vida, but I like the Cafe Rio tortillas better.
Okay, that is actually the correct answer. It used to be Cafe Rio. Tortillas are still better. Now it's Costa Vida, though. You are a true asset to the industry, and you are a true scholar of the state of Utah. Lindsey, if people want to find you and your work, where can they learn more about this most worthwhile mission that you're on and follow you in your work?
Yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn, Lindsey Lewis, CFP. Follow me on social media platform of choice, Influencing Finance. And then for the college work, it's thewomenscenter.theamericancollege.edu. And that's where you can find our research and our initiatives that are coming up. And definitely open up my schedule to any aspiring financial professionals to have consultation and a call with me to help make sure you get your feet in the right direction.
Thank you again for your time and your knowledge.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Standard Deviations. If you can't wait till next week for more behavioral finance insights, visit www.orion.com. All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by Orion and its affiliates, subsidiaries, and employees. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information the participants consider reliable.